Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. My name is Jake Burdett. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like and share the video. Remember I said in my last video I was going to do a video every day? Well, here I am almost 2 weeks later with another video, as promised. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, what I want to talk about today, and I'll link the article in the description, but there was an article in the Baltimore Sun recently, and I'll read the headline aloud. It says, Maryland Governor Hogan describes plans to fight crime in Baltimore, including 200 officers to target gangs. So, if you live in Maryland, I'm sure you know Baltimore has a lot of crime. I think it's maybe even the murder capital in the country, possibly, or one of the highest murder rates per capita in the country. So, of course, that is an issue that we should address, but I think that Governor Larry Hogan is going about it in completely the wrong way. His solution seems to be, well, there's all this crime, I guess the answer is just hire more cops, right? To crack down on these gangs and whatnot, and then these young kids committing all this violence. More police. Which, if you didn't know any better, I could see how that might make sense to you as a solution. More cops equals less crime. I could see how people might kind of get tricked into believing that if they didn't know any better. But I'm going to go over why that's not the real solution to the problem, and then I'm going to go over what I think the real solutions to the problem are. So, the reason why just hiring more cops will not significantly decrease crime is because there are already a shit ton of cops. America is the most militarized modern nation in the country, at least in my opinion. So we already have a lot of police. Specifically in Baltimore City, there's a lot of police. So if that solution already isn't working of just having more police, then why would we think that just hiring even more police is going to work? Because I don't think people get into gangs thinking like, oh yeah, gang, it's a completely safe thing. Yeah, there's no way I can like get in trouble. That never happens. No, people who join gangs do not go in thinking that, because everyone knows that there's a good chance if you're in a gang, you could get arrested and go to jail, or, of course, there's the other alternative that you get shot and killed by being in a gang, which is, I guess, the issue that they're trying to fight against. So, just saying hiring more cops and there will be less crime, that doesn't take into consideration the fact that people already know when entering a gang that there is a risk that they could get caught by the police. So, it's not going to be an effective solution. Now, let me talk about what I think the actual effective solution is, though. So, again, you have to look into, why do people join gangs in the first place. I don't think people just go into it thinking, what seems fun? Watching a bunch of my friends get shot and killed on a semi-regular basis. That sounds awesome. I'm going to join a gang. No, people don't think that way. They more are doing it because what is the one thing you need in our society to live? Obviously food and all that, and shelter. But how do you get food and shelter? You have to pay for it, of course. So in our American society, money is a necessity to live. So you got to get that money from somewhere. A lot of people get it from a legal job or career. That's where most people get their income from to pay for their goods that they need to survive. But for a place like Baltimore City, if you are a poor person there, and I'm sure the Baltimore City economy is not great. There's not many job opportunities if you're a poor person born in Baltimore without really any connections or educational opportunities. So, what is one of the few alternatives people in that situation in Baltimore City with no opportunities? What is one opportunity that they do have to make some money? Join a gang. And how do people make money in gangs? They do it through the drug trade primarily. So basically, a lot of people look at gangs as a way to make money, and that's why they join them. Like, it is like a friend thing too. Like, your gang has your back, and you're friends with all your gangs. So it does provide a sense of community as well. But my main point I'm trying to get across here is people would not join gangs and invest as much time in gangs as they do if it wasn't extremely profitable through the drug trade. So what is my solution? End the war on drugs, which would therefore make it not profitable anymore for people to join gangs. Therefore, gangs would rapidly decline in power and lose a bunch of money, and then they wouldn't be organized and wouldn't commit nearly the amount of crime that they commit now. It would greatly limit their power. And you might be thinking, well, that's a good theory, but how do we know that would actually work? Well, and from there, I point to the historical example of, so now it's street gangs is how organized crime mostly works in the U.S. But let's go back about 100 years ago. Who was the major gangs then at the time? It was the mafia, right? And how did the mafia so quickly rise to power and get so much money and power around the nation? Well, if you remember, alcohol, because of prohibition, was made illegal at the time. So legitimate stores could not sell alcohol, but of course, whether alcohol is illegal or not, people are still going to want alcohol, so they're going to find it from somewhere. So the mafia took advantage of that opportunity and started selling alcohol unregulated on the black market illegally, and basically had a monopoly on the sale of alcohol and started making a shit ton of money. And they used that money to fund their criminal organizations and activities. And just in like a decade or two, they became so I mean, we still talk about people like Al Capone today, like, you know, decades later. His name is still synonymous with organized crime, which just shows you how much of a force to be reckoned with the mafia was at the time. But now we look today, and does the mafia really exist like that anymore? No, of course not. I mean, they do exist to a degree. I'm not saying they're completely gone, but when was the last time you heard about the mafia, like, you know, committing any crime, really? Like, my point is, they're nowhere near the level of power and money that they were back then. So when did their descent begin? Well, of course, we don't have alcohol prohibition anymore. Alcohol is now legal. We've reversed that shitty decision. But once we made alcohol legal, suddenly stores started being able to sell alcohol again, and then the customers who were previously buying alcohol from the mafia and empowering the mafia said, you know what, I'd rather just buy my alcohol from a legitimate business where I don't have to worry about the dealer, like, breaking my hand or something like that. That's a little shady, buying from the mafia. I'd rather just buy from the store. And that's what, like, almost 100% of alcohol purchasers did, was they stopped going to the mafia and they started purchasing from stores. And then the mafia lost all of their funding, and then that's why we don't hear about them anymore. That's why the mafia is a joke now. And how that relates to the drug thing is, so if the mafia was able to monopolize the sale of alcohol and rise to power and become a very organized, widespread criminal organization, that's basically what the street gangs are doing now with drugs. Is instead of selling alcohol like the mafia did and monopolizing the sale of alcohol, street gangs are monopolizing the sale of drugs and then profiting and getting into power and committing widespread crime and violence because of their monopoly on the sale of drugs. Now, of course, it's not a complete monopoly, because there are rival gangs, and then they compete, and then that's what causes a lot of this crime. And the same thing goes for, south of the border with the cartel. The war on drugs has completely destructed the the Latin American countries because, again, the same thing with the mafia. The mafia had the monopoly on alcohol. The cartel has a monopoly on drugs. And whether you make drugs illegal or not, people are still going to want drugs. People are still going to do drugs. They're going to find somewhere to get them. Someone's going to go in and fill that supply vacuum, and it's always going to be a criminal organization if you just don't legalize it. So that's what's happening south of the border is the cartels have come to power because they profited off of the monopoly of the drug trade. That's what's happening in America because the gangs are profiting off the drug trade. So the solution is, why don't we just legalize, tax, and regulate drugs, and then the gangs and cartels would lose their monopoly on the sale of those drugs. Therefore, they would lose all of their money and power, and they would basically become a thing of the past, kind of like the mafia is now. Why would the dynamics be any different? So that is one key solution, is if you want people to stop joining gangs, you need to stop making it profitable to join gangs. And the way to do that is you legalize their main source of profit, which is drugs. And then most people would rather buy drugs that are regulated and much, much, much safer than street drugs. They'd rather purchase the regulated drugs in the store. If you don't believe me and you think I'm just bullshitting, look at the effects that are happening with marijuana in states like Colorado. Look at how when they decriminalized drugs, all the rates of violence in Portugal, because they decriminalized all drugs in Portugal in 2000, look at how their violent crime rates dropped. So I'm not just bullshitting. I'm not just making this up. There's historical examples, both here in the U.S. and abroad, in modern day time and from the past century, to show that this theory of mine would actually work. So that's one way, is to make gangs less profitable, and then less people will join them and commit less violence, etc. But another thing that we have to discuss in this conversation is, so yeah, people join gangs to make a profit, but of course everyone wants to make a profit. I'm in Howard County, Maryland. People here want to make a profit. Why are they joining gangs in Baltimore City but not here in Howard County? The answer is, there's so much poverty in Baltimore City, and there's absolutely no opportunity for people to lift themselves out of poverty. So they get desperate, and they need money. They need to put food on the table for them and their families at the end of the day, no matter what. And if they don't have legitimate job opportunities to do it that are safe and legal, they're going to turn to gangs to do it. So part of the solution is ending the drug war and making it not profitable. But another solution is you have to address the root of the issue, which is poverty that makes people so desperate in the first place to join gangs. So how do we address poverty and give people in places like Baltimore City job opportunities so that they don't feel so desperate that their only choice is a gang? We need things like stronger unions, which will actually fight so that jobs are worth working and are not absolute shit conditions for the worker. Because, I mean, it's not like there aren't things like minimum wage jobs available in Baltimore City, because there are. But if you're a person in Baltimore City, would you rather bust your ass working for $10 an hour, 40 hours a week, still not having enough to put food on the table, having to go on food stamps and all that? Or would you just be in a gang, which is, at least in the short term, probably easier and less laborious than working a full-time minimum wage job? If you're in that position, you're probably going to choose the gang, because even the lowest level job opportunities are such shit and such bad conditions and for so little pay that it's almost like the pros of joining a gang outweigh the cons. So to counter that, we need to make the idea of working jobs, one, we have to give people in Baltimore City the opportunity to get higher paying jobs, and two, for those people who, like, maybe the only thing they can realistically get is a minimum wage job, we have to make sure that minimum wage jobs are living wage jobs, so that you can work a full-time job and have enough to pay your bills by law, which currently we don't have that in Maryland. You can't afford to raise a family on only $10 an hour if you work a full-time job. So either you got to work 2 or 3 jobs, which who the hell wants to do that, or you join a gang, which, as we can see, many people opt for that option. So, yeah, to summarize, to end poverty or to reduce poverty so that less people are in that desperate situation to join a gang in the first place, we need things like stronger unions to make jobs more appealing, to give more rights to workers so that less people turn to a life of crime to support themselves and their families. We need a living wage so by law you can work 40 hours a week and guaranteed have enough to provide for you and your family. We need things like free college to make sure that a higher education is accessible to everyone regardless of your parents' income, because that's a huge way that there's not equal opportunity. Because if you're going to charge, tens of thousands of dollars for college, of course it's going to be mostly wealthy people going to college, and then it just perpetuates a cycle of poverty that's really hard to escape from. In addition, because the free college is good, but if someone has already started going down that life path of gang violence before they even get to the age where college is a consideration, then free college doesn't really matter because they've kind of already made their choice. So we have to address the issue before they even get to college. So another big way is universal pre-K, to make just like we have K through 12 education as a human right for public schools for American citizens. We should have that with pre-K, because one of the biggest determinants of whether a kid's going to be successful later in life is actually whether or not they went to pre-K, which now I guess it's just private, and so people with more money send their kids to pre-K, and then those kids do better later on in life because their parents had the resources to be able to start educating them very early in those formative years of a child's development. So universal pre-K, free college, living wage, stronger unions, and also this one might be a little controversial, but I think we need a federal jobs program to basically ensure to Americans that if you're willing to work, we guarantee that we will give you a decent job that pays a living wage. And if you work, you don't need to turn to a life of crime. We as a government will guarantee, if you're willing to work, that we will pay you a living wage and all that. So those are my thoughts, that Larry Hogan is just addressing the issue in a completely barbaric way without addressing the root causes of why people join gangs in the first place, or why being in a gang is profitable at all.